I thought my cousin was destroying my life, until I found out he had been saving me all along. Hi everyone, I don't usually post personal stuff online, but what I found out recently, I still can't process it properly. For most of my life, I believed my cousin was ruining everything for me. Controlling me, blocking my opportunities, destroying my relationships, even sabotaging my career. I hated him for it, deeply. His name is Karan, and until 2 months ago, I was convinced he was the villain of my life. Now I'm not so sure anymore. Now I don't even know what my life was. I'm from Jaipur, born and raised in a typical middle-upper-class Indian joint family. If you know, you know. Everything is shared, everything is judged, and nothing is ever truly private. We had a family business in textiles and export trading. My grandfather started it small. My father and uncles expanded it. By the time I was a teenager, the business was stable, respected, and financially comfortable. Not ultra-rich, but definitely, don't worry about bills, level. And then there was Karan, my elder cousin, 4 years older than me. The perfect child of the family. Top grades, disciplined, soft-spoken, responsible. Everyone loved him. Teachers praised him. Relatives compared me to him constantly. You should be like Karan. Why can't you study like Karan? Look at him, so mature. It went on for years. At first I ignored it. Then I got annoyed. Then I started hating it. And slowly, I started hating him too. Even though he never did anything openly wrong to me. That's the strange part. He never insulted me, never fought me, never humiliated me. But somehow, every time something good was about to happen in my life, it didn't. And somehow, Karan was always involved. The first memory I clearly remember was when I was 13. I had just won a school science competition. I was proud. It was the first time I felt like I was actually good at something. My parents were happy. For once, they were praising me without comparison. That night, I overheard my father on a call. He was speaking to someone in the family. And I clearly remember him saying, "We should not push him into too many competitions right now. I think Karan is right. He needs stability, not pressure." Karan, again. I didn't even know what he had said. But somehow his opinion mattered more than my achievement. That was the first time I felt something shift. Not anger yet, just confusion. The second incident made it worse. In 11th grade, I wanted to join a coaching institute in Kota. Like many students in India do for engineering preparation, I was excited. It felt like independence, a chance to build my future. Everything was almost finalized. Then suddenly, my parents changed their decision. They told me I would stay in Jaipur instead. When I asked why, my father gave a simple answer. Karan advised against sending you so far at this stage. That was it. No explanation, no discussion, just a decision made. Because of him, I remember sitting in my room that night staring at the wall. I didn't understand it. I wasn't a bad student. I wasn't irresponsible. Why was he always deciding things about my life? Without even talking to me. That was the moment dislike started turning into resentment. But the real breaking point came in college. I finally got admission in a decent engineering college in Jaipur itself. I thought now things would be normal. I would finally live my own life. Make my own decisions. Be free from comparisons. I made friends quickly. We had a group of 5. Late night chai, cricket matches, canteen gossip. Everything felt normal. And then I met her. Aditi. She was in my electronics batch. Smart, confident, not the typical judgmental crowd. We started talking, then hanging out, then slowly, we got close. After a few months, we were in a relationship. It was simple, no drama, no complications. At least that's what I thought. One evening, I got a call from my mother. Her tone was strange, not angry, not calm, somewhere in between. "Come home this weekend," she said. I asked why. She just said, "Your father wants to talk about something important." That weekend changed everything. When I reached home, I immediately felt something was off. Too quiet, too formal. My father was sitting in the living room with printed papers on the table. My mother avoided eye contact. And then he asked, "Who is Aditi?" My heart dropped. I tried to act normal. "A friend." He didn't react. He simply slid the papers toward me. Photos. Me and Aditi, walking, sitting together, eating outside, holding hands in one picture. I felt my throat go dry. "How did you get these?" I asked. My father looked at me and said one sentence. "Karan showed us." And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I didn't even wait to hear more. I left the house immediately. Called Karan on the way. He picked up calmly. No urgency. No hesitation. I didn't even greet him. "Why are you doing this to me?" I shouted. There was silence on the other end. Then he said, "You should come home first. We'll talk." "I don't want to talk." I said. "You're ruining my life." Again silence. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm preventing it from collapsing later." And he hung up. Just like that. No explanation. No defense. Nothing. After that, Everything fell apart. My parents forced distance between me and Aditi. Constant pressure, constant questioning. Eventually, the relationship broke. Not because we stopped caring, but because everything around us became too heavy. I blamed Karan for it completely. In my mind, he had destroyed the only good thing in my life. I stopped talking to him. Stopped attending family gatherings. If he entered a room, I left it. I convinced myself he was controlling, manipulative, and obsessed with interfering in my life. And I carried that belief for years. College ended. I got a job offer in Bengaluru. I was finally leaving Jaipur. Finally escaping everything. I didn't even tell my family properly. Just packed and left. The first few months were the happiest of my life. Freedom. No comparisons. No family interference. No Karan. Or so I thought. Then one day, everything collapsed again. I was called into our and told my position was being eliminated. Budget cuts. Restructuring. No fault of mine. Just unlucky timing. I was shocked, humiliated, confused. I returned to Jaipur temporarily. And at dinner that night, I overheard something that made my stomach drop. One of my uncles casually said, if Karan hadn't flagged that Bengaluru company's financial instability early, he would have stayed there longer. I froze. Karan flagged it. I wasn't supposed to hear that. But I did, and for the first time in years. A tiny crack formed in my certainty. But I still didn't change my belief. Not fully, not yet, because hatred is easier than confusion. And I wasn't ready to question everything I had believed for years. Not even close. And then came the moment that changed everything. I was asked to temporarily join the family business. Just until I figured out my next step. I agreed reluctantly, and on my first day, I saw him again, Karan, sitting at a senior operations desk. As if he had always belonged there. As if nothing had ever happened between us. He looked at me and said calmly, welcome back, and I had no idea that this was the moment my entire understanding of my life was about to collapse. When Karan looked at me and said, welcome back, I didn't answer. I simply walked past him. I wasn't there because I wanted to be. I was there because I needed a job until I found something better. My father introduced me to everyone in the office. This is my son, Aman. From today, he'll be learning every department before taking on bigger responsibilities. A few employees smiled politely. Others nodded. Then my father added something that immediately ruined my mood. Karan will supervise his training. I closed my eyes for a second. Of course, why wouldn't he? Every important phase of my life somehow led back to him. The family business wasn't glamorous. It wasn't just sitting in air-conditioned cabins signing papers. At least not in the beginning. For the first 2 weeks, I worked in the warehouse. I learned how fabrics were packed, how export labels were checked, how shipping containers were loaded, how one tiny mistake in documentation could delay an entire shipment. The work was exhausting. Every evening my back hurt. But I had to admit one thing. The business was far more complicated than I had imagined. And Karan seemed to know every single detail. He knew workers by name. He remembered birthdays. He noticed missing cartons without checking the computer. Even the oldest employees respected him. Not because he was family. Because he had earned it. I hated admitting that to myself. One afternoon, a worker accidentally loaded the wrong fabric rolls into an export container. It looked like a small mistake. I didn't even notice it. Karan did. He stopped the truck just minutes before it left the warehouse. Everyone rushed to unload the container again. The manager later explained that if the shipment had reached Germany with the wrong goods, the company would have lost nearly 80 lakh rupees. I looked at Karan. He didn't celebrate. He didn't lecture anyone. He simply helped the workers reload the truck. As if preventing disasters was just another normal Tuesday. Days turned into weeks. I still barely spoke to him. But something strange started happening. The image I had created of him over the years didn't match the person I was seeing every day. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't rude. He never raised his voice. If someone made a mistake, he corrected it quietly. If someone had a family emergency, he arranged leave without making a scene. One evening I saw him paying for the medical treatment of one of our factory workers. The worker tried to refuse. Karan smiled and said, when your daughter finishes college, you can return it if you still want to. He never mentioned it to anyone. I only knew because I happened to walk past his cabin. A few days later, I met an old accountant named Sharma Ji. He had worked with my grandfather for more than 30 years. While we were having tea, he suddenly asked, you still don't get along with Karan? I shrugged. We're just different. Sharma Ji looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled sadly. People usually judge him before knowing the full story. What story? He immediately changed the topic. Nothing. Forget I said anything. That only made me more curious. That weekend our entire family gathered at my grandparents' house. It was my grandmother's 75th birthday. The house was full of relatives. Children were running everywhere. The kitchen smelled of fresh puris, paneer, and halwa. For a few hours, everything felt normal. Then my youngest cousin accidentally spilled mango juice all over my uncle's expensive laptop. Everyone gasped. The child burst into tears. Before anyone could react, Karan stepped forward. "It was my fault," he said. "I kept the laptop too close to the edge." I stared at him. It clearly wasn't his fault. Not even remotely. But he took the blame anyway. My uncle sighed and let the matter go. Later that evening, I asked my younger cousin why he hadn't admitted what happened. His answer surprised me. "Karan Bhaiya told me not to worry. He said children shouldn't be scared of making honest mistakes." For some reason, that reminded me of a childhood memory. A broken glass frame, a punishment, and someone taking the blame for me. I had almost forgotten about it. The next Monday, something unexpected happened at the office. A luxury SUV stopped outside the building. A man in an expensive suit walked inside asking for Karan. Everyone seemed uncomfortable. They went into a private meeting room. The discussion lasted almost an hour. When the man finally left, he looked angry. Very angry. I asked another manager who he was. The manager hesitated. Then he whispered, "He's from Rathore Exports, one of our biggest competitors. Why would a competitor visit us personally?" Before I could ask another question, Karan walked out of the meeting room. His expression was calm, but his shirt sleeve had a small tear, as if someone had grabbed him during an argument. He noticed me looking. Without saying a word, he adjusted his sleeve and walked away. That evening curiosity got the better of me. I searched for Rathore Exports online. They had grown incredibly fast over the past 5 years. Almost suspiciously fast. As I kept reading, I noticed something strange. Every time our company lost a major contract, Rathore Exports seemed to win it. Coincidence? Maybe, but it felt odd. The following day I was asked to deliver some documents to the records room in the basement. The room was old, dusty, filled with metal cupboards and decades of files. While searching for the correct cabinet, I accidentally knocked over a stack of folders. Papers scattered across the floor. As I gathered them, one file caught my attention. It had my name written on the cover. I frowned. Why would there be an official company file with my name? Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Inside were newspaper clippings, copies of my college certificates, old photographs, employment records, even copies of apartment rental agreements from Bengaluru. Someone had been keeping track of my life for years. My hands started shaking. Who would do something like this? I quickly checked the last page. At the bottom was a signature. Prepared by Karan Mehta. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why would my cousin keep a file about me? Before I could read further, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. Karan was standing at the entrance. His face had gone completely pale. He looked at the open file in my hands. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He took one slow step toward me and said quietly, "Aman, you were never supposed to find that file." My heart began pounding. "What is this?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he closed the records room door behind him. And that was the moment I realized. Whatever was inside that file was far bigger than a simple family misunderstanding. The sound of the records room door closing echoed through the basement. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. I was still holding the file. Karan stood a few feet away, staring at it. His calm expression had disappeared. It was the first time in my life I had seen him look genuinely nervous. I tightened my grip on the file. "What is this?" I asked again. "Why is there an entire file about me?" Karan took a deep breath. "Give it to me." I shook my head. "No, Aman, no, not this time." For years, I had accepted every unanswered question, every strange decision, every interruption, every lecture. Not anymore. I want the truth. Karan looked at me for a long moment. Then he quietly pulled out a chair and sat down. "So," he said, "you're finally asking the right question." He looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally, like someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for years. "I can't tell you everything," he said. "Why not?" "Because it's not only my secret." I laughed bitterly. "My life is in this file, and you're telling me it's someone else's secret." He nodded. "Your life is exactly why I can't speak carelessly." That answer only made me angrier. I opened the file again. The first page contained copies of my school report cards. The next few pages had photographs of me from different years. Some were from family functions. Others looked like they had been taken from social media. Then I reached a section labeled Incident Reports. I frowned. The first report was dated 12 years ago. It described the broken glass incident at my grandparents' house. At the bottom, Karan had written, "Handled." Aman was not questioned. I turned another page. It mentioned my Kota coaching admission. Another page described my relationship with Aditi. Another detailed my Bengaluru job offer. Every major event in my life had been documented. It felt less like a family record, and more like someone had been assigned to watch over me. I looked up. "Were you spying on me?" "No." "Then what do you call this?" "Protecting you." I almost laughed. "By ruining everything, you still believe I ruined those things, didn't you?" He slowly shook his head. No. Before I could ask another question, his phone rang. He looked at the screen. His expression changed instantly. He answered, yes. He listened silently for a few seconds. Then stood up. What happened? Another pause. I'm coming. He disconnected the call. We have to leave. I'm not going anywhere until you explain this. You'll get your explanation. When? He looked directly into my eyes. After we reached the hospital. My heart skipped a beat. Hospital. He nodded. Your father collapsed during a client meeting. The drive to the hospital was completely silent. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Thousands of thoughts raced through my mind. Was he okay? Was it a heart attack? Would he recover? As soon as we reached the emergency ward, my mother rushed toward us. Her eyes were red from crying. The doctors are treating him, she said. They think it was stress. I sat down in the waiting area. Nobody spoke. An hour later, the doctor finally came out. He is stable now. The entire family let out a sigh of relief. The doctor warned that my father needed complete rest. No business meetings. No unnecessary stress. No arguments. Everyone agreed immediately. Except my father. Even from the hospital bed, his first concern was the company. The Singapore shipment, he whispered. Karan stepped forward. I'll handle it. My father nodded. For the first time, I noticed something strange. My father trusted Karan without asking a single question. Completely. Absolutely. The kind of trust that is built over years. For the next week, my father remained in the hospital. During that time, Karan practically lived in the office. He handled meetings, visited suppliers, managed export documents, spoke to clients in different time zones. He barely slept. One night, I stayed back to help finish paperwork. Around midnight, I found him sitting alone in his cabin. His tie was loosened. His eyes were tired. A cup of coffee sat untouched on the desk. Without thinking, I asked, when did you last go home? He looked surprised by the question. I don't remember. You've been here every day. He smiled faintly. Someone has to keep everything running. I looked around his cabin. There were no luxury decorations. No expensive paintings. No signs of someone obsessed with power. Just files, documents, family photographs, and one framed picture. It was an old photo of me. I couldn't have been more than 10 years old. I was smiling while holding a cricket bat. I frowned. Why do you have that? He glanced at the photo. I like that picture. Why? You looked happy. That answer stayed with me for the rest of the night. A few days later, Sharmaji called me into the accounts department. He closed the door behind us. I've worked with your grandfather since before your father got married, he said. I've seen every major decision this family has made. I nodded. He lowered his voice. You think Karan wants power? I didn't answer. Sharmaji sighed. 5 years ago, another company offered him 3 times his salary. He refused. Why? Because he said he couldn't leave the family business. I frowned. So, he also refused ownership shares your grandfather wanted to give him. What? He said everything should remain in the bloodline. I stared at him. That made no sense. If Karan truly wanted control, why refuse ownership? Why refuse more money? The image I had built in my mind was beginning to crack. That evening, I finally gathered the courage to ask my grandmother. She was sitting on the veranda, knitting quietly. Daddy, she smiled. Yes, can I ask you something? She nodded. What kind of person is Karan? She stopped knitting. For a long moment, she simply looked at me. Then she smiled sadly. One day you'll understand. I sighed. Everyone keeps saying that. She reached out and held my hand. Because the truth isn't ours to tell. Before I could ask another question, she changed the topic. And once again, I was left without answers. 3 nights later, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I went downstairs for water. As I passed my father's study, I noticed the light was on. The door was slightly open. Inside, my father was talking to Karan. Their voices were low. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. But one sentence stopped me in my tracks. My father said, if he finds out before the right time. Karan replied, he deserves the truth. My father shook his head. Not yet. And if we wait too long? Karan asked. There was a long silence. Then my father quietly said something that made my blood run cold. If Aman ever learns who has really been after him since he was 16, he'll never forgive himself. I froze. Someone had been after me. Since I was 16, I accidentally shifted my weight. The wooden floor creaked. Both of them looked toward the door. I stepped back instinctively, but it was too late. The door opened. Karan walked out. He looked at me, then at the glass of water in my hand. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said quietly, you heard that, didn't you? I couldn't even deny it. Because the expression on my face had already given me away. I couldn't answer. My mouth had gone completely dry. Karan looked at me for a few seconds before quietly closing the study door behind him. The hallway felt strangely silent. The only sound was the ticking of the old grandfather clock in our living room. You heard enough, he said. But not enough to understand. I stared at him. What did Dad mean? Who has been after me since I was 16? Karan looked toward the study. Then back at me. This isn't the place. Then where? He thought for a moment. Tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock. Where? Our old school cricket ground. Before I could ask another question, he walked upstairs, leaving me standing there with 100 unanswered questions. I barely slept that night. Every possibility ran through my mind. Had someone been stalking me? Was this connected to our business? Or was this another one of Karen's mysterious half-truths? At exactly 6 the next morning, I reached the cricket ground. The place looked almost unchanged. The rusted practice nets were still there. The old banyan tree still stood beside the boundary line. Karan was already waiting, holding 2 cups of tea. He handed one to me. Thanks. He nodded. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. I'm here, so tell me. He took a deep breath. Do you remember your 16th birthday? I frowned. Not really. You had a big party. I nodded slowly. Yes. Do you remember a man arguing with your father outside the house? I tried to think. Very faintly, I remembered raised voices. A tall man. A black SUV. Then my mother pulling me inside. I remember something. Karan nodded. His name was Vikram Rathore. The owner of Rathore Exports. Yes. What did he want? Karan looked away for a moment. He wanted your grandfather to sell part of the family business. I frowned. And your grandfather refused. So, he didn't take rejection well. I laughed nervously. People argue in business all the time. Karan didn't smile. This wasn't an argument. It was a threat. My heartbeat became faster. What kind of threat? Karan looked directly at me. He said if your grandfather wouldn't sell willingly, he would make sure the family regretted it. I stayed silent. He wasn't talking about money. He was talking about family. For a moment, I thought Karan was exaggerating. Then he pulled out his phone. He opened an old photograph. It showed our house from years ago. Parked across the street was a black SUV. Another picture. The same vehicle outside my school. Another. Outside my coaching classes. Another. Outside my college. I stared at him. What is this? We noticed it years ago. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because your grandfather didn't want you to grow up in fear. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You're saying someone followed me? For years. He nodded slowly. Not constantly, but enough to make us careful. I suddenly remembered something. When I wanted to go to Kota. Karan nodded. Yes. You stopped me because of this. It wasn't safe. And Aditi. He closed his eyes for a second. That was different. What do you mean? He hesitated. Then quietly said, someone had started asking questions about her. The world seemed to stop. What? They knew where she studied. They knew where she lived. They even knew your class schedule. I felt my stomach tighten. So you told my parents? Yes. I stepped back. You destroyed my relationship. I protected both of you. You don't know that. I do. His voice became firm for the first time. Because 3 days after you broke up, someone tried following her home. I froze. What? She wasn't harmed. But that confirmed our fears. I couldn't speak. Every memory I had carried for years suddenly felt uncertain. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally I asked, who else knows? Your parents. Grandfather knew before he passed away. Your grandmother. And me. Nobody else. I shook my head. This doesn't make sense. If someone wanted revenge, why not attack the business directly? Karan gave a tired smile. They did. They stole clients. They bribed employees. They leaked confidential information. They filed false complaints. They did everything they could. But when none of that worked, they started watching the family. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Just then, Karan's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. His face changed instantly. He answered, yes. He listened for barely 10 seconds. Then stood up. What happened? Another pause. We're coming. He disconnected the call. What is it? I asked. The warehouse. There was a fire. We reached the factory in less than 20 minutes. Fire engines were already outside. Workers stood in small groups, looking terrified. Thick smoke still rose from one corner of the warehouse. Thankfully, the fire had been controlled before spreading. No one was injured. My father arrived shortly after, even though he had been told to rest. His face looked pale. The fire officer walked toward us. Good news, he said. It was contained quickly. But, my father frowned. But what? The officer looked serious. This doesn't appear to be an electrical accident. It looks like someone started it deliberately. Silence. Absolute silence. I slowly turned toward Karan. He wasn't surprised. Not even a little. Almost as if he had been expecting this. Then one of the security guards came running toward us. Sir, we found something near the back gate. What? The guard handed over a small silver lighter. It had a black engraved logo on it. I looked closer. My heart nearly stopped. It was the logo of Rathore Exports. Karan stared at the lighter without saying a word. Then he looked at me. His expression was calm, but I could see it in his eyes. The game that had been hidden for years had finally begun. The lighter sat in the fire officer's gloved hand. No one spoke. The small black logo of Rathor Exports seemed impossible to ignore. One of my uncles finally broke the silence. So that's it. They've admitted it. The fire officer shook his head. No, this isn't proof. It could have been dropped by anyone. Karan nodded in agreement. He's right. We don't accuse anyone without evidence. I looked at him in disbelief. If you think they're behind this, why are you so calm? He looked at me. Because panic is exactly what they want. The damaged section of the warehouse was sealed for investigation. Fortunately, the fire had started in an empty storage area. Most of the valuable stock had been saved. But someone had clearly intended to send a message. As the workers cleaned up, I noticed Karan walking toward the CCTV control room. I followed him. The security supervisor looked nervous. Sir, there's a problem. What problem? Karan asked. The cameras covering the back gate stopped recording for exactly 23 minutes. When? Just before the fire. Karan closed his eyes for a second. As expected. I frowned. As expected. He looked at me. This isn't the first time. Back in his office, Karan opened a cabinet and removed 3 old files. He placed them on the table. Look, the first file contained reports from 2 years ago. Another warehouse break-in. No goods stolen. Only CCTV damaged. The second file described a server failure. Again, only security records had disappeared. The third file documented an anonymous threat sent to the company. Every incident had one thing in common. The cameras had mysteriously stopped working. I looked at him. You've been dealing with this for years. He nodded, mostly without telling the family. Why? Because fear spreads faster than facts. That evening, my father called an emergency family meeting. Everyone gathered in the conference room. Managers, department heads, family members. The atmosphere was tense. My father stood slowly. His health still hadn't fully recovered. We have 2 priorities, he said. Protect our employees, and protect this company. He turned toward Karan. From today, you'll lead the internal investigation. No one objected. Not a single person. That level of trust spoke louder than any title. Later that night, I found Karan alone, reviewing security footage from nearby roads. You really think someone inside the company is helping them? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he rewound a video. A white delivery van appeared on the screen. It stopped outside the warehouse for less than a minute before driving away. Karan paused the footage. See the driver. I leaned closer. The image was blurry. I couldn't recognize the face. I don't know him. Karan zoomed in. The driver wore a company ID card. But not ours. It belonged to a logistics contractor we had stopped working with almost a year earlier. That's strange, I said. Exactly. He wrote down the registration number. We'll find out who owns it. The next morning, I arrived early at the office. For the first time, I wasn't avoiding Karan. Instead, I wanted answers. As I walked toward his cabin, I heard voices inside. The door was slightly open. It was Sharma Ji. I checked the financial records, the old accountant said. Someone has been creating fake supplier payments. Karan frowned. How much? Sharma Ji slid a file across the desk. Nearly 3 crore rupees over 4 years. I almost stopped breathing. 3 crore. That wasn't a simple accounting error. That was theft. Karan noticed me standing outside. Come in. I hesitated, then walked inside. He pushed the file toward me. Read it. The fake payments had been made to companies that barely existed. Shell, businesses, false invoices. Everything looked professional. Someone inside had planned this carefully. Who approved these? I asked. That's what we're trying to find out. For the next few days, I worked closely with Karan. It felt strange. For years, I had refused to even sit in the same room with him. Now we were spending hours together. Slowly, I started noticing things I had ignored before. He never took credit for success. He always praised the team first. When mistakes happened, he accepted responsibility before blaming anyone else. And despite everything, he still treated me with patience. Never once did he mention the years I had spent hating him. Not once. One evening, while leaving the office, I finally asked the question that had been bothering me. Why didn't you ever defend yourself? He looked puzzled. When everyone thought you were controlling me, why didn't you tell me the truth? He smiled faintly. Would you have believed me? I opened my mouth, then closed it again. The answer was obvious. No, I wouldn't have. I hated you, I admitted quietly. I know, and you still helped me. I made a promise. To whom? He looked toward the family temple at the corner of the office lobby. Your grandfather. I felt my chest tighten. What promise? He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, the day before he passed away, he made me promise that no matter what happened, I would protect you and this family. I didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, I felt ashamed. That same night, Just as we were preparing to leave, Karen's phone rang. He answered immediately. Yes. His expression hardened. When? He listened carefully, then looked straight at me. We need to go. What happened? The police found the owner of the white delivery van. And, Karen's jaw tightened. The van was registered under a fake company. But the fingerprint found inside belongs to someone who worked in our office. I stared at him. Who? He took a slow breath. Then quietly said, I hope I'm wrong. Because if the police were right, the person who had been betraying our family for years was someone we saw every single day. The drive to the police station felt longer than it actually was. Neither Karen nor I spoke. I kept replaying his last words in my head. Someone we see every single day. Every employee's face flashed through my mind. The warehouse manager, the security supervisor, the accounts team, even Sharma Ji. No, it couldn't be him. He had worked with our family for decades. I looked at Karan. Do you know who it is? He kept his eyes on the road. I have a suspicion. Who? I don't want to accuse anyone until I see the evidence. That was typical Karan. Even now, he refused to jump to conclusions. When we reached the police station, the investigating officer greeted us. He placed a sealed evidence file on the table. The fingerprint matches one of the people listed in your employee records. My heartbeat quickened. The officer slowly opened the file. He slid a photograph across the table. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The face staring back at me belonged to Ramesh, our logistics coordinator. He had worked with us for nearly 8 years. He was quiet, friendly, always smiling. I had spoken to him almost every day since joining the office. This can't be right, I whispered. The officer nodded. We thought the same, but the fingerprint is a complete match. Karan didn't react. He simply asked, where is he now? The officer sighed. He disappeared yesterday evening. My stomach dropped. He ran. It appears so. His phone was switched off. His rented apartment had been emptied. Even his bank account had been cleared out. Someone had planned this escape carefully. As we walked back to the car, I kicked a loose stone across the parking lot. I can't believe it. Karan nodded. He wasn't acting alone. You think there are more? There have to be. One person couldn't organize all this for years. The thought made me uncomfortable. If Ramesh had help, who else was involved? The next morning, the office felt different. News of Ramesh's disappearance had spread. Employees whispered in corners. People who had trusted him were shocked. My father gathered everyone in the conference room. He looked tired, but determined. I know many of you are worried, he said. But until the investigation is complete, we will not accuse anyone else. He paused before continuing. Our business was built on trust. We will not destroy that trust through rumors. Everyone nodded. It was the right decision. But I could still see fear on many faces. Later that afternoon, Karan asked me to help him search Ramesh's office. We carefully checked every drawer, file, and cabinet. Most of it looked normal. Invoices, delivery schedules, supplier contacts, nothing unusual. Then I noticed something odd. One drawer wouldn't open completely. It seemed stuck. I pulled harder. The false wooden panel behind it shifted. There was a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small black notebook. Karan carefully picked it up. Every page contained dates, amounts of money, vehicle numbers, and one repeated symbol, a simple letter, V. What does that mean? I asked. Karan stared at it. I don't know, but judging by his expression, I wasn't sure he was telling the whole truth. That evening, we visited Ramesh's apartment. The police had already searched it. The place was almost empty. As we walked through the living room, an elderly neighbor approached us. Are you from his office? She asked. Yes, Karan replied. She looked relieved. I thought you should know something. Both of us listened carefully. The night before he disappeared, a man came to meet him. What did he look like? I asked. She thought for a moment. Tall, gray hair, very expensive car. Then she added something unexpected. He called your employee Beta, like they knew each other. Karan's expression changed. Did you hear his name? The woman nodded slowly. I think he called him Vikram. Karan and I looked at each other. The name hit us both instantly. Vikram Rathore, the owner of Rathore Exports. On the drive back, I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. Was all of this really because grandfather refused to sell the business? Karan was silent for several seconds. Then he answered, no. Then why? He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Because your grandfather had something Vikram desperately wanted. What? I don't know. My frustration returned. You're hiding something again. He shook his head. I'm not hiding it. I genuinely don't know. My grandfather never told me. He only said, if the wrong people ever found it, our family would be in danger. A strange chill ran through me. Found what? Documents, money, property. None of it made sense. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, my grandmother called me into her room. She looked unusually serious. Without saying a word, she handed me an old brass key. This belonged to your grandfather. I looked at it. What does it open? She smiled sadly. I don't know. He only told me one thing. If the day ever comes when the family stops trusting each other, give this key to Aman. I stared at the key in my hand. It was old, heavy, and engraved with a tiny symbol. A lotus. The same lotus symbol that decorated our ancestral Haveli in the village. I looked up. Daddy, is this for the Haveli? She nodded slowly. There is a room in that house that has remained locked for more than 20 years. Before I could ask another question, she whispered, I think your grandfather left something there. The next morning, I showed the key to Karan. The moment he saw the lotus engraving, his face changed. You've seen this before? I asked. He nodded. Only once. When? The day your grandfather died. I frowned. He showed me this key and told me, if Aman ever receives it, take him to the Haveli immediately. I looked at him in disbelief. So we're going? Karan nodded. Yes. Then he looked out the office window toward the distant highway. I have a feeling, whatever has been hidden for all these years, we're finally about to find it. Neither of us realized, someone was already watching the office from a parked black SUV across the street. And the moment we left for the ancestral Haveli, they quietly started following us. The next morning, Karan and I left Jaipur before sunrise. The old brass key rested safely inside my backpack. Neither of us spoke much during the drive. The highway was almost empty. The orange glow of the rising sun spread across the fields as we headed toward our ancestral village. I kept looking at the key. One question refused to leave my mind. What was my grandfather hiding? And why had he waited all these years for me to find it? About 2 hours into the journey, Karan glanced at the rearview mirror. His expression changed. What is it? I asked. Don't turn around. That was enough to make my heart race. Why? I think we're being followed. I resisted the urge to look back. Instead, I watched Karan's face. His eyes kept moving between the road and the mirror. Same black SUV, he said quietly. It's been behind us for almost 30 kilometers. I swallowed hard. Are you sure? He nodded. Very. Instead of continuing straight, Karan suddenly turned onto a smaller village road. The SUV followed. A few minutes later, he took another unexpected turn. Again, the SUV followed. Now there was no doubt. Someone was tracking us. Karan took out his phone and called someone. Inspector Verma, it's Karan. We're being followed. He listened for a few seconds. Understood. He ended the call. What did he say? I asked. He told us not to stop. The narrow road eventually opened into our ancestral village. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. The old tea stall, the temple, the pond where we used to play as children. Finally, the Haveli came into view. It stood at the edge of the village. Large, silent, covered in years of dust. The carved wooden doors were still standing. But the building clearly hadn't been lived in for a long time. Karan parked the car inside the courtyard. When I looked back toward the road, the black SUV was gone. We entered the Haveli together. The air smelled of old wood and dust. Sunlight slipped through broken windows. Family portraits still hung on the walls. I recognized my grandfather in one of them. He looked much younger, standing proudly in front of the same house. Karan walked confidently toward the eastern wing. You know where the room is? I asked. He nodded. Your grandfather showed me. We climbed an old staircase. At the end of a narrow corridor stood a thick wooden door. Its brass lock carried the same lotus engraving as the key. I slowly took the key out. For a moment, neither of us moved. After 20 years, the room was finally about to be opened. The key turned smoothly. The lock clicked. The heavy door creaked open. Dust filled the air. Inside was a small study. Nothing luxurious, just bookshelves, a wooden desk, a steel cupboard, and an old ceiling fan that hadn't moved in years. Everything was exactly as it had been left. Almost like time had stopped. We began searching carefully. Most drawers contained old papers, family photographs, business files, nothing unusual. Then Karan noticed something carved underneath the desk. A tiny lotus symbol. He pressed it. A soft clicking sound echoed through the room. I stepped back. Part of the bookshelf slowly moved sideways. Behind it was another room, a hidden room. I stared in disbelief. I don't believe this. Karan didn't answer. He was just as shocked. The hidden room was much smaller. In the center stood a single iron trunk. No furniture, no decorations, only the trunk. It looked ancient. The same lotus symbol was engraved on the front. I walked toward it slowly. There was no lock. I lifted the lid. Inside were several neatly wrapped files. Bundles of handwritten letters, a leather diary, and dozens of property documents. On top of everything lay a sealed envelope, written in my grandfather's handwriting. It simply said, "For Aman." My hands started shaking. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The ink had faded slightly, but every word was still readable. Greater than my dear Aman. If you are reading this, it means the time has finally come. I pray that I am wrong, but if this room has been opened, then our family is once again in danger. There are many truths I wanted to tell you myself. Unfortunately, life has not allowed me that chance. Before you judge anyone, especially Karan, read everything I have left behind. I stopped reading, my eyes filled with tears. Even my grandfather had known I would one day misunderstand Karan. Karan quietly turned away to give me privacy. I continued reading. Greater than Karan has carried a burden that never belonged to him. I asked him to protect this family, even if everyone misunderstood him, even if they hated him, even if you hated him. I slowly lowered the letter. My chest felt heavy. I couldn't bring myself to look at Karan. I had spent years blaming him. Before either of us could say a word, a loud noise echoed from downstairs. Someone had kicked open the front door. Then another sound. Footsteps. Several people, running inside the Haveli. Karan immediately closed the trunk. We're not alone. The footsteps grew louder. Voices echoed through the empty halls. Search every room. My heart nearly stopped. They had found us. Karan quickly looked around the hidden room. There must be another exit. We searched desperately. Nothing. The footsteps reached the staircase. Closer. Closer. Then a familiar voice shouted from outside the study. You've been hiding long enough. I froze. I recognized that voice immediately. It was Vikram Rathore. Karan looked at me and whispered, "No matter what happens, don't let him take your grandfather's diary." The footsteps stopped just outside the study door. Then, the doorknob slowly began to turn. The doorknob slowly turned. Karan looked at me without saying a word. His expression was calm, but I could see the tension in his eyes. He quietly pointed toward the iron trunk. I immediately understood. I grabbed my grandfather's diary, the sealed documents, and a letter addressed to me. Karan wrapped them inside an old cloth lying in the hidden room and handed me my backpack. "No matter what happens," he whispered, "don't let go of this bag." I nodded. The study door burst open. 4 men rushed inside. All of them were dressed in black. Behind them walked a man in his late 50s, wearing an expensive gray suit. His hair was neatly combed. His face carried a confident smile. I recognized him instantly. Vikram Rathore. He looked around the room before his eyes settled on us. "So," he said with a smile, "it took you long enough." Neither Karan nor I replied. Vikram slowly walked toward the desk. "I've been waiting for this room to be open for almost 20 years. I frowned. "You knew about this place?" He laughed. "Of course. Your grandfather was a brilliant man. He managed to hide it even from me." His eyes moved to my backpack. "But judging by your expressions, I think you've already found what I came for." Karan stepped in front of me. "You're trespassing." Vikram smiled. "And yet you're the one standing in a hidden room." One of his men moved forward. "Sir, should we search them?" Vikram raised a hand. "Not yet." He looked at Karan. "You've become quite a problem over the years." Karan remained silent. "I offered you money. You refused. I offered you a partnership. You refused. I even offered you your own company. You still refused." Vikram sighed dramatically. "Such loyalty is rare." Then he looked at me. "You know, if Karan had accepted my offer years ago, he'd be one of the richest businessmen in Rajasthan today." I looked at Karan in surprise. He had never mentioned any of this. Vikram continued walking around the room as if he owned it. "Do you know why your grandfather and I became enemies?" I shook my head. He smiled. "Because of land." I frowned. "Land, not ordinary land." He folded his hands behind his back. "Nearly 30 years ago, the government announced plans for a massive industrial corridor outside Jaipur. Very few people knew. Your grandfather found out before anyone else. He quietly purchased hundreds of acres through different companies." My heart skipped a beat. "I later discovered what he had done," Vikram continued. "I offered to buy those properties. He refused. So I offered double. He still refused. Then triple." He laughed in my face. Vikram's smile disappeared. "That day, he embarrassed me in front of half the business community." Karan spoke for the first time. "So you spent decades trying to destroy an entire family?" Vikram shrugged. "I simply wanted what belonged to me." "It never belonged to you," Karan replied. Vikram ignored him. "The problem was, I never found the original ownership papers." His eyes returned to my backpack. "I assume they're inside." I tightened my grip on the straps. Vikram noticed. "There it is. The fear. I've seen that look before." He smiled coldly. "Your grandfather had the same expression." Something inside me snapped. "You ruined our business. You threatened our family. You followed us for years. All for land." Vikram laughed. "You still don't understand. It isn't just land. It's worth several thousand crore rupees today." The room fell silent. Several thousand crore. Now everything suddenly made sense. Without warning, one of Vikram's men lunged toward me. Before I could react, Karan stepped between us. The man grabbed Karen's shirt. Karen pushed him back with surprising force. Another man rushed forward. The study exploded into chaos. A chair crashed against the wall. Books fell from the shelves. I tried to help, but Karen shouted, "Run, I'm not leaving you, Aman, go." For the first time in my life, I heard genuine fear in his voice. Dash dash dash. I grabbed the backpack and ran toward the hidden room. Behind me I heard shouting. Glass breaking. Furniture crashing. I searched desperately for another exit. Nothing. Then I remembered the old window overlooking the backyard. It was small, but big enough to squeeze through. I kicked it open. The wooden frame shattered. I climbed out and dropped nearly 8 feet onto the ground below. Pain shot through my legs. But I kept running. Dash dash dash. As I reached the courtyard, I heard engines. Police vehicles. Inspector Verma had arrived. Officers rushed through the front gate. Police. Nobody moved. The men inside the Haveli scattered. Some tried to escape through the back. Others locked themselves inside rooms. I turned around just in time to see Karan walking out of the main entrance. His lip was bleeding. His shirt was torn, but he was standing. Relief flooded through me. Dash dash dash. The police quickly surrounded the property. Several of Vikram's men were arrested immediately. But in the confusion, Vikram disappeared. Inspector Verma cursed under his breath. He slipped away. Karan wasn't surprised. He always plans an escape. Dash dash dash. The police searched the Haveli for several hours. Every room was photographed. Every document catalogued. Inspector Verma finally approached us. "What exactly did you recover?" I looked at Karan. He nodded. "It's time." I carefully removed the diary and the property documents from my backpack. The inspector's eyes widened. This could change everything. Dash dash dash. Back at our Jaipur office later that evening, the entire family gathered in my father's cabin. My father looked healthier than he had in weeks. I handed him my grandfather's letter. He read it silently. When he finished, he closed his eyes. Tears rolled down his face. He looked at Karan. "I'm sorry." Karan immediately shook his head. "You have nothing to apologize for." "No," my father replied. "I should have told Aman the truth years ago." The room fell silent. Then my father slowly turned toward me. "There's one final truth that none of us have ever told you." I looked from my father to Karan. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, my father took a deep breath and said, "Karan isn't just your cousin. He's the son of the man who gave his life to save yours." My mind went completely blank. What? The room spun around me. Nothing made sense anymore. Everything I thought I knew about my family had just been turned upside down. For a few seconds, I couldn't hear anything. The room around me faded into silence. My father's words echoed in my head. "Karan isn't just your cousin. He's the son of the man who gave his life to save yours." I looked at Karan, then at my father, then back at Karan again. "No," I whispered. "That's impossible." Karan lowered his eyes. He didn't deny it. I slowly sat down. My legs no longer felt strong enough to hold me. What are you talking about?" My father walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "When you were 6 years old, our family attended a wedding outside Jaipur. You probably don't remember much." I searched my memory. Only scattered images came back. Lights, music, people dancing, nothing more. My father continued. "On the way back, our car's brakes failed while coming down a hill. My grandmother quietly wiped her tears. It all happened within seconds. The driver lost control. The car rolled over. I stared at him. I don't remember." "You were unconscious." My father nodded. "You were trapped inside. The fuel tank had started leaking." My heart began pounding. Before anyone else could reach the car, Karan's father climbed inside. I slowly turned toward Karan. My father continued. "He pulled you out, but before he could escape, the car caught fire." The room fell silent. I felt my chest tighten. "He died." My father nodded. "He saved your life." I couldn't speak. Every emotion I had buried over the years came crashing down at once. I looked at Karan. "You knew." He nodded quietly. "I was 10. I remember everything." His voice remained calm, but his eyes had filled with tears. My father always believed family came before everything. He proved it. I covered my face with both hands. For years, I had blamed him, ignored him, insulted him, avoided him, and all this time, his father had died saving me. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I swear I didn't know." "I know," Karan replied softly. "None of this was your fault." My father opened my grandfather's diary. There is more. The first few pages described the accident in detail. Then came another entry, written only a week later. "Today I made a promise to my late son's best friend. His son, Karan, will never be treated as anything less than my own grandson. And if I am no longer here one day, he will protect Aman until the danger passes." My father looked at Karan. "I never wanted this responsibility to fall on you." Karan smiled faintly. It never felt like a burden. The diary revealed something even more shocking. Years before the accident, my grandfather had uncovered evidence that Vikram Rathore had acquired land through forged documents and illegal intimidation. Instead of exposing him immediately, my grandfather secretly collected proof. Every forged signature, every fake company, every illegal payment, he stored everything inside the hidden room, waiting for the right moment. That was why Vikram wanted the Haveli so desperately. Not just for the property papers, but for the evidence that could destroy his entire business empire. Inspector Verma spent the entire night reviewing the documents. By morning, he looked exhausted, but excited. This is enough. He closed the final file. We can reopen several old cases. And this time, we have original evidence. Search warrants were issued the same day. Police teams raided multiple offices connected to Rathore exports. Servers were seized, financial records confiscated, several senior executives were taken in for questioning. News channels quickly picked up the story. For the first time in years, Vikram Rathore was no longer the hunter. He had become the hunted. But there was one problem. Vikram himself was still missing. No one knew where he had gone. The police searched his farmhouse. Nothing. His corporate office, empty. His city residence, abandoned. It was as if he had vanished overnight. 3 days later, I visited Karan at the office. He was standing alone on the terrace, looking over the city. I walked beside him. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then I quietly said, "I'm sorry." He smiled. "For what?" "For every hateful thing I ever thought about you. For blaming you. For never listening." Karan looked at the sunrise. "You were reacting to what you knew. I never gave you the chance to know more." I shook my head. "You still protected me." He laughed softly. "I made a promise." I finally smiled. "And you kept it." That afternoon, just as life finally seemed to be settling down, Inspector Verma called. His voice was urgent. "We found Vikram." I immediately stood up. "Where?" "He surrendered." I frowned. "Surrendered?" "Yes. But before giving himself up, he left a package. For Aman." My heart skipped a beat. "For me?" Inspector Verma sighed. "Yes. And I think you're going to want to open it in person." I looked at Karan. He looked just as confused as I was. Neither of us knew that the contents of that package would reveal one final secret. A secret that even my grandfather had taken to his grave. The drive to the police station was quiet. This time, there was no fear. Only questions. Inspector Verma was waiting for us in his office. A small brown package sat on his desk. It was sealed with clear tape, and my name was written across the front in black ink. "For Aman." Inspector Verma spoke first. "Vikram Rathore surrendered early this morning. He refused to answer most of our questions, but he insisted that this package be handed to you personally." I looked at Karan. He gave me a small nod. I carefully broke the seal. Inside were 3 things: an old photograph, a handwritten letter, and a USB drive. I picked up the photograph first. It showed my grandfather standing beside a much younger Vikram Rathore. Both of them were smiling. They looked like friends. I couldn't believe it. I looked at my father. "You knew about this?" He nodded slowly. "They started their businesses together." My mind raced. "So, they weren't always enemies?" "No," my father replied. "At one time, they trusted each other like brothers." My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. It was written by Vikram himself. I began reading aloud. "Aman, by the time you read this, my game will be over. You deserve to know one truth. I never hated your grandfather. I hated the man I became after losing to him. Greed destroyed my judgment. Every bad decision after that was my own." The room fell silent. I continued. "Your grandfather gave me many chances to stop. I refused every one of them. That is why I lost everything. Do not make the same mistake in your own life." I folded the letter slowly. For the first time, I felt something unexpected. Not sympathy, but sadness. One man's greed had destroyed countless lives, including his own. Inspector Verma plugged the USB drive into his computer. It contained hundreds of files. Bank transfers, audio recordings, emails, hidden financial accounts. Everything connected Vikram to years of corporate fraud, bribery, forged land deals, and the attacks on our business. There was enough evidence to expose an entire criminal network. Within weeks, dozens of arrests were made. Several corrupt officials were suspended. Properties obtained through illegal documents were seized. Rathore exports collapsed under the weight of the investigation. The business empire Vikram had spent decades building disappeared almost overnight. Life slowly returned to normal. For the first time in years, there were no anonymous threats. No suspicious vehicles. No hidden surveillance. No fear. Our family business recovered steadily. Employees who had stayed loyal through the difficult years were rewarded with promotions and bonuses. My father officially announced that Karan would become the company's managing director. The entire office applauded. No one deserved it more. A month later, we returned to the ancestral Haveli. This time, not because of danger, but because my grandmother wanted the house restored. As workers cleaned the old rooms, children from the village ran through the courtyard, laughing just as we once had. The house finally felt alive again. I stood on the balcony beside Karan. You know, I said, smiling, I spent half my life thinking you were trying to ruin me. He laughed. I know, I was an idiot. You were young. No, I replied, I was stubborn. He smiled. There's a difference. We both laughed. It was probably the first genuine laugh we had ever shared. A few weeks later, our family organized a small ceremony in memory of Karan's father. His photograph was placed beside my grandfather's. For years, his sacrifice had been known only within the family. Now, everyone heard the truth. I stood in front of the gathering and took a deep breath. I owe my life to a man I never got the chance to thank. I looked at Karan, and I owe an even bigger apology to his son. The room was silent. I walked over and hugged him. Not because anyone expected it. Because it was long overdue. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Some apologies don't need many words. 6 months later, I officially joined the family business full-time. This time, not because I had no other option. Because I wanted to. Karan and I worked together every day. We argued sometimes. We disagreed on business decisions. But now we talked things through. Like brothers should. One afternoon, I noticed the old file with my name on it still sitting in Karan's cabinet. I smiled. So, are you still keeping records on me? He laughed. No. He opened the file. Every page after the day I learned the truth was blank. He closed it and handed it to me. I don't need this anymore. Why? He smiled. Because I don't have to protect you from a distance anymore. We'll face whatever comes together. That evening, as the office lights slowly turned off, I stood by the window overlooking Jaipur. I thought about everything that had happened. For years, I believed my greatest enemy lived inside my own family. The truth was the exact opposite. The person I hated the most had quietly sacrificed his youth, his happiness, and his own dreams, simply to keep a promise. A promise made to a man who was no longer alive. People often say that heroes wear uniforms or capes. I've learned that's not always true. Sometimes, a hero is simply the person willing to let you hate them. If it means keeping you safe. And if there's one lesson this journey taught me, it's this. The truth doesn't always arrive when you want it. Sometimes, it arrives when you're finally ready to understand it.